The security camera footage was crystal clear. Karen diving into his pool at 6 a.m. using his towels, drinking his coffee. For 3 months, she'd been living her best life in his backyard while he worked double shifts. But when Marcus finally confronted her, Karen's response shattered everything he thought he knew about neighbors, boundaries, and the woman next door. What she screamed at him that day would haunt him forever. "You can't stop me. This pool is legally mine." Little did she know Marcus had been documenting everything. And when the truth finally came out, it wasn't just Karen who would be banned for good. Marcus Chen pressed his face against the upstairs window, his breath fogging the glass as he watched the impossible scene unfold below. There she was, again Karen Westbrook from next door, floating serenely on her back in his pool, a mimosa balanced on her chest, designer sunglasses reflecting the morning sun. "This is insane," he muttered, fumbling for his phone. Read 7:23 a.m. on a Tuesday. Karen had been at this for 3 months now, and Marcus was reaching his breaking point. He'd first noticed her unauthorized pool visits in late March, just after he'd returned from his week-long business trip to Seattle. Marcus worked as a software consultant, often pulling 12-hour days and traveling extensively for clients. His beautiful craftsman house with its pristine backyard pool had been his sanctuary until Karen decided it was hers to dot at first. He'd thought his eyes were playing tricks on him. A glimpse of movement through the kitchen window, the sound of splashing when he knew he hadn't been swimming. But then he'd started paying attention. Every morning between 6:30 and 9 a.m., while Marcus was either asleep or getting ready for work, Karen would slip through the gate that connected their properties, a gate that previous owners had installed for neighborly convenience, and make herself completely at home. She'd even brought her own pool furniture. Marcus grabbed his camera and zoomed in. Documenting her latest violation, Karen had positioned a floating tray in the pool, complete with what appeared to be eggs Benedict, fresh fruit, and that mimosa. She was wearing a bright red bikini that probably cost more than most people's rent, and her highlighted blonde hair was perfectly styled even while swimming. The audacity, Marcus breathed, snapping photo after photo. The really infuriating part wasn't just the trespassing, it was how she'd transformed his space. Karen had moved his outdoor furniture around, brought in potted plants, and even installed what looked like a small refrigerator in his pool house. She'd essentially created her own private resort in his backyard. Marcus had tried being reasonable. He'd left polite notes asking her to stop. He'd attempted to catch her in the act and have a civilized conversation. But Karen was strategic. She seemed to know his schedule better than he did, always managing to slip away before he could confront her directly. Until today, Marcus threw on clothes and headed downstairs, his jaw set with determination. He'd called in sick to work specifically for this moment. If Karen wanted to play games, he was ready to end them. He stepped onto his back patio and cleared his throat loudly. "Excuse me." Karen didn't even flinch. She took a leisurely sip of her mimosa and adjusted her sunglasses. "Good morning, Marcus. Lovely day, isn't it?" The casual familiarity in her voice made his blood boil. "Karen, what the hell are you doing?" "In my pool, swimming, obviously." She gestured around with theatrical grandeur. "Though I must say, you really should consider updating the pool filter. The water quality has been subpar lately." Marcus stared at her, speechless. The woman was critiquing his pool maintenance while illegally using his property. "This ends now," he said, his voice tight with controlled anger. "Get out of my pool, remove your stuff from my property, and don't come back." Karen finally turned to look at him directly, and her expression shifted from casual indifference to something much more calculating. She stood up in the shallow end, water cascading off her tanned shoulders, and walked slowly toward the pool's edge. "I don't think you understand the situation, Marcus." "I understand perfectly. You're trespassing on my property, and I want you gone." Karen laughed, a sound devoid of any warmth. "Trespassing? That's adorable." She climbed out of the pool with deliberate slowness, reaching for a plush towel that Marcus definitely hadn't provided. "You really should read your property documents more carefully." "What are you talking about?" "The easement agreement, sweetie. Filed with the county in 1987 when this pool was built." She wrapped the towel around herself like a robe, every movement dripping with condescension. "The previous owners of your house granted perpetual pool access rights to the property next door." "My property." Marcus felt like the ground had shifted beneath him. "That's impossible. I would have known about that when I bought the house." You. When was the last time you actually read through all those tedious legal documents? Karen pulled her wet hair back and secured it with what appeared to be a designer hair tie. Real estate lawyers can be so thorough, can't they? All those pages and pages of easements, covenants, and restrictions. Easy to miss one little clause. About recreational water access, you're lying. And my Karen's smile was sharp as glass. The agreement is quite specific, actually. The residents of 1247 Maple Street, that's me, have full access to the swimming pool and associated facilities at 1245 Maple Street between the hours of 6 a.m. and 10 p.m. daily in perpetuity. Marcus felt sick. Even if that were true, which I doubt, there would be limitations. Rules. You can't just move in furniture, and the agreement grants full recreational use. Karen interrupted. That includes reasonable accommodation for comfort and enjoyment. I'm not damaging anything, Marcus. I'm simply exercising my legal rights. She walked over to what Marcus now realized was indeed a small outdoor refrigerator. She'd somehow installed near his pool house. Karen pulled out a bottle of expensive-looking champagne and held it up to the light, examining it like a sommelier. I've been very considerate, actually. I only use the pool when you're not home or sleeping. I keep everything clean and tidy. I even had the water tested last month and added chemicals when the pH was off. She popped the champagne cork with practiced ease. You should be thanking me for the free pool maintenance. This is insane, Marcus said, but his voice lacked conviction. A terrible doubt was creeping into his mind. What if she was telling the truth? What if there really was some ancient agreement he'd missed? What's insane is that you've been living here for 2 years and never bothered to fully understand what you bought. Karen poured champagne into a crystal flute that she'd apparently stashed somewhere in his pool area. But don't worry, I'm not unreasonable. We can work out a schedule if you'd like, though I must insist on keeping my morning swim time. It's become quite essential to my routine. Marcus watched in stunned silence as Karen settled into one of his lounge chairs, which she'd apparently upgraded with expensive-looking cushions, and began applying sunscreen with meticulous care. I want to see this supposed agreement, he finally managed. Of course you do. I'll have my attorney send you a copy. She smiled sweetly, along with a formal notice that any interference with my easement rights will result in legal action. Attorney, Mew David Corman, at Corman, Bradley & Associates. Lovely man, specializes in property law. Karen took a sip of champagne and sighed contentedly. He was very interested to learn that you've been harassing me about exercising my legal rights. Apparently, that sort of thing can get quite expensive for property owners who don't know their obligations. The name hit Marcus like a physical blow. Corman, Bradley & Associates was one of the most prestigious and expansive law firms in the city. If Karen really had retained them, this was about to become a nightmare. You're bluffing, he said, but even to his own ears, it sounded desperate. Am I? Karen pulled out her phone with theatrical slowness and showed him the screen. Marcus could see a text conversation with someone named David K. discussing pool easement enforcement. The messages looked legitimate. Too legitimate. I don't believe this, Marcus said, sinking into one of his own chairs. There's no way something like this wouldn't have come up during the buying process. Oh, but it did. Karen's smile turned predatory. It's right there in your title insurance documents. Page 47, paragraph 12, subsection C, subject to recreational water access easement, as recorded in County Deed Book 1247, page 89. She recited it from memory, and Marcus felt his stomach drop. Those words sounded familiar, vaguely, distantly familiar, like something he might have skimmed over in a stack of boring legal documents 2 years ago. Even if that's true, he said weakly, surely there are reasonable limits. The easement is quite specific about what constitutes reasonable use, Karen interrupted, and I've been very careful to stay within those bounds. No overnight stays, no loud parties, no permanent structures. Just quiet enjoyment of the pool facilities during permitted hours. She gestured around at what Marcus was now seeing as a carefully curated setup. Nothing was technically permanent. The furniture could be moved. The refrigerator was on wheels. Even the plants were in portable containers. This is my home, Marcus said, his voice cracking slightly. My privacy, my sanctuary. I can't have a neighbor just waltzing in whenever she feels like. Marcus stared at the tiny camera lens glinting in the morning sun, his hands trembling with a mixture of rage and violation. The device was expertly concealed behind the decorative foliage of what he'd assumed was just another of Karen's poolside plants. But this wasn't about pool access or easement rights, this was surveillance. He pulled out his phone and began photographing the camera from multiple angles, careful not to disturb its position. As he moved around Karen's makeshift outdoor setup, he spotted 2 more cameras, one tucked into the fake rock near his pool filter, another mounted inside what looked like a decorative birdhouse she'd hung from his pergola. "Jesus Christ," he whispered, the full scope of Karen's operation becoming clear. She hadn't just been trespassing, she'd been conducting systematic surveillance of his property and daily routines. Marcus's software background kicked in as he analyzed the setup. The cameras were high-end wireless models, probably streaming directly to her house next door. She would have been able to monitor his comings and goings, know exactly when he was home, when he was sleeping, when he was traveling for work. That's how she'd managed to avoid him for 3 months. She'd been watching him the entire time. His phone buzzed with an incoming call from an unknown number. Marcus almost declined it, but something made him answer. "Mr. Chen, this is David Corman from Corman, Bradley & Associates. I represent Karen Westbrook in matters relating to your shared property easement." The attorney's voice was smooth and professional, with just enough condescension to make Marcus's jaw clench. "I understand there was an incident this morning." "You could call it that," Marcus said carefully, "though I'd call it trespassing and harassment. Mr. Chen, I'm going to stop you right there. My client has provided me with a recording of your conversation this morning, and I must advise you that continuing to interfere with Ms. Westbrook's legal rights could result in serious consequences." Marcus felt his blood run cold. Recording, audio, surveillance of the pool area is well within the scope of the easement agreement. Ms. Westbrook has every right to document any interference with her property rights. Corman's tone became sharper. What she doesn't have to tolerate is harassment, threats, or verbal abuse. "I never threatened her. Your exact words were, 'This ends now, and I want you gone.' In the context of disputing a legal easement that constitutes intimidation." Marcus closed his eyes, realizing how his words might sound without context. "I was simply asking her to respect my property. Mr. Chen, let me be very clear. The easement agreement is ironclad and legally binding. Any attempt to prevent Ms. Westbrook from exercising her rights will result in immediate legal action. Are we understood?" Before Marcus could respond, Corman continued, "I'm sending over the easement documentation this afternoon, along with a formal cease and desist notice. I strongly advise you to retain counsel before this situation escalates further." The line went dead. Marcus stood in his backyard, surrounded by Karen's surveillance equipment and luxury pool accessories, feeling like Alice falling down the rabbit hole. Everything that had seemed impossible an hour ago was apparently not only possible, but legally protected. He needed help, and he needed it fast. 3 hours later, Marcus sat across from Patricia Valdez, one of the city's most respected property attorneys. He'd paid her emergency consultation fee. "I've reviewed the documents Mr. Corman sent over," Patricia said, spreading papers across her mahogany desk. "The easement is legitimate, Marcus, filed in 1987, properly recorded, and yes, it does grant significant pool access rights to the neighboring property." Marcus felt his last hope crumbling. "So she can just ... move in, set up cameras, turn my backyard into her personal resort." "The cameras are a problem," Patricia said firmly. "Easement rights don't typically extend to surveillance of the servient property owner. That's a clear overreach." Finally, something, however, Patricia continued, and Marcus's heart sank at that qualifier. "The poolside access, furniture, even the refrigerator, that's all within the scope of reasonable enjoyment as defined in the agreement." Marcus slumped in his chair. "How did I miss this when I bought the house?" "Because it was buried in your title insurance documentation, and your real estate attorney probably assumed it was standard boilerplate." Patricia pulled out a thick folder. "But here's what's interesting, Marcus. I pulled the full chain of title going back to 1985. She spread out a series of documents that looked like they'd been copied from microfilm. The easement was created by Harold and Millicent Chuneni relation." Marcus blinked. Chen is a common name, but ... My grandfather was Harold. He lived here when I was a kid, but I thought he sold the house in the 80s. He did, to Robert and Susan Mitchell in 1989. But look at this. Patricia pointed to a document dated 2 years earlier. In 1987, your grandfather granted this pool easement to his neighbors, the Cromwells, who owned what's now Karen's property. Why would he do that? According to the deed notes, it was part of a larger property agreement. The Cromwells helped finance your grandfather's pool construction in exchange for permanent access rights. Patricia flipped through more papers. Your grandfather was having financial difficulties in the mid-80s. This arrangement let him build the pool he wanted, while giving the Cromwells what was essentially a shared recreational facility. Marcus stared at the documents, seeing his grandfather's familiar signature on legal papers that would haunt him decades later. So this has been binding on every owner since then. Exactly. The Mitchells knew about it when they bought from your grandfather. When you bought from them in 2023, you inherited the same obligations. But Karen said the previous owners had an understanding that she wouldn't use the easement. Patricia nodded grimly. That's where this gets interesting. I did some digging into Karen's background. She's been through a brutal divorce, as she mentioned, but there's more. Her ex-husband was Dr. Richard Westbrook's prominent plastic surgeon, very wealthy family, and the divorce settlement was finalized in January. Karen got the house, but virtually nothing else. Her ex-husband had been systematically moving assets offshore for months before filing. She's broke, Marcus, and desperate. The pieces began clicking into place, so she's using the easement to extort money from me. Looks that way. But here's the thing: extortion requires proof of intent to obtain money through threats or coercion. Simply exercising a legal easement, even aggressively, doesn't meet that threshold. Marcus felt defeat washing over him. So she can just keep doing this indefinitely. Legally, yes, the easement runs with the land in perpetuity. Patricia leaned forward. But, Marcus, I've been practicing property law for 20 years, and something about this feels off. Karen's behavior is too calculated, too perfectly designed to make your life miserable while staying within legal bounds. What do you mean, most? People with legitimate easement rights use them reasonably. Maybe swim a few times a week. Keep things simple. Karen has essentially moved in. The furniture, the appliances, the surveillance, ... double quotes. Patricia tapped her pen against the desk. It's like she studied the easement language and designed her usage to maximize your discomfort while maintaining legal cover. She did mention having an attorney review everything. Exactly. And that concerns me, because it suggests this isn't just about pool access, it's about creating leverage. Patricia pulled out her laptop. I want to dig deeper into the original easement terms. Sometimes these old agreements have clauses that nobody pays attention to until they become relevant. For the next hour, Patricia dissected the easement language with surgical precision, occasionally muttering legal phrases that meant nothing to Marcus but seemed to energize her. Here, she said finally, pointing to a dense paragraph of legalese, Section 4. Subsection D: easement rights may be modified or terminated by mutual agreement of all parties or upon material breach of the terms herein specified. What does that mean? It means if Karen violates the easement terms, you might have grounds to terminate it entirely. Patricia's eyes gleamed with professional excitement. And Marcus, I think those cameras might be exactly the violation we need. That afternoon, Marcus returned home to find Karen's poolside setup more elaborate than ever. She'd added a shade, umbrella, what appeared to be a small outdoor kitchen setup, and was hosting what looked like a cocktail party for one, complete with a Bluetooth speaker playing smooth jazz. She waved cheerfully when she spotted him. Marcus. Perfect timing. I was just testing the acoustics for a small gathering. I'm planning this weekend. A gathering. Just a few friends from my book club. Nothing to elaborate, maybe 8 or 10 ladies for afternoon cocktails by the pool. Karen adjusted her oversized sun hat and smiled innocently. The easement does permit reasonable social use of the recreational facilities. Marcus felt his blood pressure spiking. You want to bring guests to my property? Well, technically, it's our property during easement hours, Karen corrected. But don't worry, I'll make sure everyone parks in your driveway so they don't block the street. They are not parking in my driveway. Oh, but they'll have to. The easement includes reasonable access and parking accommodations for permitted users and their guests. It's right there in Section 7. Marcus pulled out high. Part 3. Marcus spent Thursday evening with Jeremy Martinez, his former colleague turned cybersecurity consultant, learning everything he could about wireless surveillance systems. What they discovered made Karen's legal chess game look like child's play. These cameras are streaming to a local network, Jeremy explained, his laptop displaying code that looked like digital hieroglyphics to Marcus. Basic home security setup, but she made a rookie mistake. The devices are broadcasting on an unsecured frequency, meaning anyone with the right equipment can intercept the signal. Jeremy grinned. And lucky for you, anyone includes guys like me who know how to set up passive monitoring networks. By Friday morning, Marcus had his own surveillance system running, not to spy on Karen, but to document exactly what her cameras were recording. The irony wasn't lost on him that he was now surveilling the surveillance of his own property. Book club party was scheduled for Saturday afternoon. Throughout Friday, Marcus watched from his home office as she transformed his backyard into an elaborate entertainment space. She brought over additional furniture, installed outdoor lighting, set up what appeared to be a full bar station, and even hired a catering company to deliver food and supplies. But the most interesting development was the steady stream of delivery. Trucks that arrived throughout the day, not just for party supplies, but for permanent-looking installations, a new outdoor sound system, professional-grade patio heaters, a large outdoor television mounted to his pool house wall. Marcus documented everything, but it was Patricia's afternoon phone call that changed the game entirely. "I've been digging deeper into Karen's divorce records," she said, her voice tight with excitement. "Marcus, she's not just broke, she's in serious legal trouble." "What kind of trouble?" "Her ex-husband is claiming she hid assets during the divorce proceedings. Expensive jewelry, art, offshore accounts. The court issued a restraining order on her spending pending a full investigation." Marcus felt pieces clicking into place. So, all this expensive pool equipment could be purchased with funds she's not supposed to have access to. But here's the bigger issue I found. The original correspondence between the Cromwells and your grandfather about the easement agreement. Patricia's tone shifted to barely contained excitement. "Marcus, the easement was never supposed to be perpetual. There's a termination clause that triggers if the Cromwell property is ever sold to someone outside the original family." Marcus's heart leaped. "Karen's not a Cromwell." "Exactly. She married into ownership. But when she divorced, the easement should have terminated automatically. Her ex-husband was technically the property owner, not her. But she got the house in the divorce settlement, which makes her a new owner, not a family member. The easement language is very specific. Only extends to Harold Cromwell, his spouse, and their direct descendants." Patricia paused for effect. "Marcus, I don't think Karen has any legal right to use your pool at all." Marcus stared out his window at Karen, directing the setup of what looked like a professional-grade outdoor bar. "Does she know this? I doubt it. The termination clause is buried in subsection 12 of the original agreement. Her attorney probably didn't read that far back in the chain of title. So what do? We let her have her party. The more evidence we have of her exceeding reasonable personal use, the stronger our case becomes. But Marcus, I need you to be very careful about how you handle this. If we're right about the easement being invalid, Karen could be charged with criminal trespassing." Saturday afternoon arrived with picture-perfect weather and the sound of Karen's guests arriving in luxury cars that filled Marcus's driveway exactly as she'd promised. From his upstairs window, he watched 12 women in designer casual wear descend on his backyard like a flock of well-dressed vultures. Karen had outdone herself. The pool area looked like something from a high-end resort magazine, complete with floating cocktail service, live acoustic guitar music, and what appeared to be a professional photographer capturing every moment. Marcus's phone buzzed with a text from Jeremy. "Your surveillance feeds are getting interesting. Karen's cameras are picking up some very revealing conversations." Indeed, they were. The wireless monitoring system Jeremy had set up was capturing everything Karen's own cameras recorded, including audio from the party guests. What Marcus heard through his earphones made him grab his own recording equipment. "Karen, this is absolutely incredible," one woman was saying. "You never mentioned you had such a beautiful pool." "Oh, it's been in the family for years," Karen replied smoothly. "We just finished renovating the whole space." Another guest chimed in, "And you said you might be selling." "The market is so hot right now," Marcus nearly choked. "Selling, we're considering our options," Karen said carefully. "The property has such unique features: dual access, shared recreational facilities, very rare in this neighborhood." She was describing his house like she owned it. The photographer was capturing it. Alcaran posed by the pool. The elegant party setup, the luxury amenities she'd installed. But most disturbing were the shots that included the house itself, taken from angles that made it look like Karen lived there. Marcus called Patricia immediately. "She's creating a fake property portfolio," Patricia said after he described what he was seeing. "Photos that make it look like she owns a house with a pool, probably for mortgage fraud or asset concealment." "Can we stop this?" "Not yet, but keep recording everything. We're building a case that goes way beyond easement disputes now." As the afternoon wore on, the party grew more elaborate and more incriminating. Karen's guests were clearly under the impression that she owned the entire property. She gave tours of her pool house, discussed renovation plans for her backyard, and even mentioned potential expansion ideas that would require tearing down the fence between the properties. But the most damaging moment came when Marcus overheard Karen talking to a woman who appeared to be a real estate agent. "The zoning allows for subdivision," Karen was explaining. "We could potentially create 2 separate parcels, each with pool access. Very attractive to buyers. And the current owner is amenable to selling," the agent asked. "Let's just say he's highly motivated. There are some complications with his title that make a quick sale beneficial for everyone involved." Marcus felt his blood turn to ice. Karen wasn't just using his pool, she was actively undermining his property ownership, creating legal complications that would force him to sell. The plan was diabolical in its sophistication. Drive him crazy with the pool invasion. Legal disputes about the easement create title complications that would make his property difficult to sell to anyone except her. Then offer to solve all the problems for a fraction of the property's value. As evening approached and the party began winding down, Marcus made his decision. He called Patricia one final time. "I'm done playing defense," he told her. "What do we need to terminate this easement and press charges? Are you sure you're ready for this fight? It's going to get ugly." Marcus watched Karen posing for more photographs by his pool, her guests toasting her beautiful home with champagne that cost more than most people's weekly groceries. She made it ugly when she decided to steal my life. Monday morning, Marcus was waiting by his pool at 6:30 a.m. when Karen arrived for her regular swim. She froze when she saw him, then smiled with practiced innocence. "Good morning, Marcus. Early start today. We need to talk." "Of course. Though I should mention that David advised me not to have any more direct conversations about the easement without legal representation present." Marcus pulled out a thick folder of documents. "Your easement is invalid, Karen." Her smile faltered. "For just a moment, I'm sorry, the original agreement terminated when the Cromwell property was sold outside the family. You have no legal right to be here." Karen's composure cracked slightly, but she recovered quickly. "That's ridiculous." David reviewed all the documentation thoroughly. Did he review the correspondence between Harold Chen and Harold Cromwell from 1987? The letters specifically limiting easement rights to family members? Marcus opened the folder and pulled out photocopied documents, or the termination clause that activates upon transfer to non-family members. Karen's face went pale, but she maintained her defiant stance. "Even if that were true, I've been using the pool for months. Adverse possession, prescriptive easement, there are other legal theories that protect my rights, not when you've been committing felonies." Marcus pulled out his phone and played a recording of Saturday's party conversation about property subdivision and forced sales. Karen's mask finally slipped completely. "You recorded my guests. Your cameras recorded your guests. I just happened to be monitoring the same frequencies." Marcus smiled coldly. "Mortgage fraud, asset concealment, conspiracy. To commit real estate fraud. That's what you've been planning, isn't it? You can't prove any of that. I can prove you've been surveilling my property illegally, trespassing on land you have no right to access, and conspiring to manipulate property sales through fraudulent means." Marcus gestured to the elaborate setup she'd left in place since Saturday, all documented by your own surveillance equipment. I won,